Chapter 537 The Unexpected Fire Burst. White frost began to cover the dueling ground. As such, it was very easy to see the bright fireballs flying across the place. Shu Minking had already noticed the fireball being used as a sneak attack on him. He quickly determined how he would dodge the fireball easily while being surrounded by the ice lock. The fire burst was cast at the perfect time, right between the gap he was backing into as the ice lock came from both sides. Other magicians would most likely summon their defensive equipment, but Shu Minking was no ordinary magician. He would still remain confident in the midst of the attacks raining down. "I'll give you a water barrier," said the plump woman at the back of the team. "No, it's fine," replied Shu Minking, as he dodged the attacks. Ice lock flew wildly through the lingering frost, like two thick, sturdy chains. A single hit was strong enough to break a few bones. Shu Minking smartly used the wind track to lean forward slightly, like he was going to dodge the attacks by dashing forward. Li Jia saw his direction change, and quickly manipulated the ice lock's target area. To his surprise, Shu Minking immediately changed the direction of wind track. Or more precisely, he had already set up another wind track beforehand. He suddenly changed direction and slid backward nimbly with the help of the wind. His hands were still in his pockets. His movement of sliding across the ground was elegant, like a prince of the wind, urging the girls among the spectators to scream at the top of their lungs. That's not the end yet. Shu Minking enjoyed the limelight and the screams. His face was wearing a confident smile. He slid backward to dodge the ice lock, before slanting to his right all of a sudden. A fire burst had descended from above him, as if it had long been waiting for him. "I've already told you, this basic spell is useless." Shu Minking was good at changing the direction of his movements. He quickly moved in another direction to escape from the fire burst's area of effect. There was a loud explosion, the seemingly ordinary fire burst exploding as it landed on the ground, producing a large cloud of flames. The fiery tongues in the cloud extended 10 meters into its surroundings, like giant flaming serpents wriggling their tails. The shockwave from the explosion was shocking, too. Even the two ice chains were knocked slightly away. Shu Minking was confident that he was right outside of the fire burst's coverage, but he never thought that the fire burst was not just the ordinary kind. Its area of effect surprised him, surpassing 20 meters. An ordinary fire burst, even with a soul seed, would only cover a diameter of 10 meters. Shu Minking was around 12 meters away from the explosion, planning to let his hair dance elegantly to the gusts produced by the explosion. He was sure he was safe from the fire burst. However, the flames did not stop at a distance of 10 meters. They knocked him into the air and slammed him into the ground, burning with flames. His blue hair was disheveled, and now slightly burnt too. As his hands were in his pockets, he did not have the time to draw them out, and ended up falling to the ground face down, giving the ground a kiss. He could feel the blood burst out from his nose. Fuck. Fuck me. Shu Minking did not suffer a serious injury, yet the fall totally took away the handsome image he was establishing right from the beginning. He almost went crazy when he rose to his feet, his face covered in ash. "I was just wondering why that guy looked so familiar. I think he's the Demon King from the fire school, Mo Fan, the guy who leveled up his basic spells to the 4th tier, said the plump woman. "And you're telling me now," yelled Shu Minking. For fuck's sake, he had never seen any basic spell as powerful as that fire burst. It was almost comparable to an intermediate spell. Shu Minking had faced countless opponents in the past, yet he never met anyone who would simply waste their money on basic spells. His fire is the rose flame, multiplying the power of his fire spells by 2.5 times. The 4th tier of the fire burst increases the power further, too. As a result, his fire burst should be 5 times stronger than an ordinary fire burst. "It's pretty much half an intermediate spell," the woman informed them. "Guess I misjudged it. I've been attracting their attention for so long. Don't tell me none of you did anything," said Shu Minking. "No way. Didn't you see that my ice lock is already?" He, the battle maga wearing bright red lipstick giggled. "I'll leave that infamous Mo Fan to you. Rumors have described him as a destruction machine. "We'll focus on the others," said the muscular Earth Element student. When Xu Mingqing learned that his teammates were already making their moves, he quickly cast the thought of him being embarrassed in front of the crowd away. He could still feel the pain from the fall, yet it was nothing significant. He had decided to fight seriously, since his previous indifferent attitude would not earn him lots of points from the referees. So what if he's stacked with destructive spells? I can easily take him down still. Xu Mingqing tried to rebuild his confidence. A black aura flowed between his fingers as he slowly turned it into something sharp. Giant Shadow Spike. Shadow Rose Thorns. Xu Mingqing spread his fingers apart. The black auras materialized into black spikes, which he was holding between his fingers. There were 3 spikes in total. Xu Mingqing threw the spikes out, and they disappeared into the air, waiting to strike on his command. Unlike the first-tier and second-tier Giant Shadow Spike, the third-tier Giant Shadow Spike was even more unpredictable. The 3 spikes were able to hide in the shadows for a certain period. Once they were set up, a single thought could easily fire one of the spikes at a target. The first spike would stop the target's movement, the second spike would seal off the target's thoughts, and the third would seal off the soul. Basically, anyone who was hit by the first Giant Shadow Spike would no longer be able to move. If the second spike landed, it would seal off the target's thoughts, preventing the target from casting any spells. The third spike was the deadliest. It would penetrate one's soul, inflicting serious damage to the target, who would suffer great pain. If the injury was not treated in time, allowing the force to corrode the soul, it would be the same as diminishing the target's lifespan, something irreversible. Mo Fan was unable to level up his Shadow Element Intermediate spell to the 3rd tier yet, but he was more familiar with its terrifying effects than anyone else. Currently, the Giant Shadow Spikes were hidden somewhere nearby. Mo Fan would have to be on the alert for quite some time, since he had no idea when the Giant Shadow Spikes would attack. That being said, the Giant Shadow Spikes were unable to move around freely. They had to rely on the shadows to hide their presence. Firing them under a bright light would significantly reduce their power. Don't worry about giving me light protection. That Xu Mingqing isn't stupid enough to use his Giant Shadow Spikes right away. Protect them instead. Mo Fan quickly stopped I-Tutu when he saw her about to cast light protection on him. The duration of light protection, Sacred Shield, was shorter than the Giant Shadow Spikes. Xu Mingqing could simply wait until the protection wore off before making his move. I-Tutu would simply waste the precious defensive spell on him. I-Tutu nodded and placed her focus on Lu Xing and Li Jia instead. Chapter 538. I've always hated the summoning element. Hey, I have just arrived, but I saw that girl crying. Do you mind telling me what happened? Ding Yumian was focused on the match when a polite, yet deep voice spoke up behind her. Ding Yumian initially thought it was someone trying to start a conversation with her using the topic. She always found herself in similar situations, yet when she turned around, she did not see any hint of what she had assumed from the person's eyes, so she proceeded to tell him what had gone on. Ding Yumian knew if a man was trying to pick her up, yet the man talking to her had a weird gaze. It had a determination and coldness that did not belong to someone of his age. I see, thanks. The man fell silent after listening to Ding Yumian's rough explanation. As he placed his attention on the match, Ding Yumian no longer felt his existence, as if he had turned into a black statue. Ding Yumian ignored him and focused on the match. Mo Fan was still facing a problem, which was the Giant Shadow Spikes hiding somewhere in the dueling ground. The Giant Shadow Spike could be deadly. It was the strongest imprisoning spell among all intermediate spells, but it was tricky to land the attack accurately. Many experienced people would avoid the places covered in shadows, giving them enough time to dodge the Giant Shadow Spikes when they showed up. However, Ding Yumian was clearly aware that a true expert would not rely on the Giant Shadow Spike to overwhelm their opponent, but would use it more to pin them down. Now, Mo Fan was surrounded by flickers of lightning. The sound they made was enough to send a chill down his opponent's spine. Since he wielded the Lightning Seed Qinjun, if Mo Fan was given a chance to cast the 3rd-tier Thunderbolt, Wild Strikes, Xu Mingqing's team would suffer severe damage, as on top of defensive spells, they would be forced to use their defensive equipment too. After all, the spell was the strongest destructive spell in the intermediate level. No one would dare to underestimate its power. However, as Mo Fan was close to finishing the star pattern under his teammates' cover, a sharp spike burst out from the shadow under the frost and flew right at him. "The water barrier won't be able to stop it, watch out," said Li Jia to Mo Fan. Mo Fan knew I Tutu had already used light protection on Lu Xing to protect her from the ice lock. He seemed well prepared for the attack, instantly withdrawing the half-completed star pattern and hopping back nimbly, dodging the rather obvious giant shadow spike. "Running out of patience already?" Mo Fan asked with a mocking smile. A giant shadow spike was different than other spells. It was not readily available after completing the star pattern. Therefore, once he dodged all 3 of the spikes, the threat that Shu Minking posed to him would be cut in half. "It's not a waste if it stopped your lightning star pattern." Shu Minking burst into laughter too. However, the smile on his face did not seem relaxed. He had just discovered that Mo Fan's attack was a level higher than Gugn. Following that thought, Shu Mingkong's eyes glittered in the middle of his words. The second spike was fired as soon as Mo Fan dodged the first one. Even though the giant shadow spike was effective when used to pin down an enemy, it would basically put an end to the battle if he managed to land it. Shu Minking was hoping to defeat Mo Fan as soon as possible. Unfortunately, Mo Fan was already keeping an eye out for the second spike, while Shu Minking thought he had fired at the perfect time. Mo Fan had described his opponent as impatient not because he was in a rush to disrupt his lightning star pattern, but for the fact that he was expending 2 of the spikes in a row. As a shadow magician, Mo Fan's familiarity with using the shadows around him was not any weaker than Shu Minking. He knew that his opponent was not only trying to interrupt his channeling. A burst of flame ignited on Mo Fan's palm, which he threw straight into the air. The light from the fire quickly exposed the shadow spike that was flying at him rapidly, significantly weakening its power. Once Mo Fan was able to see its path, it was fairly easy to dodge it. He simply stepped aside and let the second spike fly past him. "You've got your final spike left. Do use it wisely. Of course, I'll be quite speechless if you use it to disrupt my next spell." Mo Fan backed off slightly, allowing Li Jia to cover him with both water and ice elements. New stars began to appear around Mo Fan's figure, which began to glow in the color of the moon with a presence that did not originate from this world. The stars were aligned rapidly, tearing the space apart. "That guy is trying to summon," said the slightly plump woman. "Crap, I totally forgot his double innate elements," cursed Shu Minking. After learning that their opponent was Mo Fan, they were not too surprised by his double innate elements, yet when they actually fought against him, they were extremely irritated by it. Shu Minking only had the last shadow spike left. Using it to interrupt the channeling of a basic spell would be overkilling it, yet even if he succeeded, Mo Fan could simply cast the spell again, since it was only a basic spell. Despite the spell being only at the basic level, Mo Fan had summoned the Swift Star Wolf, a summoned beast whose strength was just below an average warrior-level creature. Close combat had always been most magicians' weakness. The Swift Star Wolf was not strong enough to dominate among warrior-level creatures, yet he was more than enough to keep a student in the top 20 busy. "My Swift Star Wolf is proud of his speed, too. You can have some fun with him," Mo Fan said from in the middle of the team. He fondled the Swift Star Wolf's hair with a smile. The Swift Star Wolf was very excited. As long as he was not summoned to fight the Flame Bell, he was still his usual ferocious self. The Swift Star Wolf had spent a long time with Mo Fan, so he had also become as cunning as a fox. He knew that his master was fighting against strong opponents, and each had the ability to face a warrior-level creature on their own, so he did not make a move impatiently. He ran to the side with his outstanding speed, waiting to strike when his targets lowered their guard. Just a moment ago, Shu Mingkong's giant shadow spike was targeting Mo Fan's team in the dark, forcing them to be alert at all times. Now, the tables had turned. Duels usually consisted of nullifying the spells between opponents, yet a warrior-level creature had suddenly joined the battle. His presence was a lot more intimidating than a giant shadow spike. As soon as their defense crumbled, or they lowered their guard slightly, the swift star wolf would lunge at them instantly. "I've always hated the summoning element," swore the muscular student with the earth element. Not only was the guy's basic spell half as powerful as an intermediate spell, and he possessed the destructive lightning element, he had even summoned a wolf out to secure the upper hand by abusing their numbers. Mofan's ability to use his basic magic to overpower top students and then shift the entire dynamic of the battle is impressive. Would you like to continue editing the next part of the story, or are you interested in a deeper analysis of Mofan's battle strategy? Chapter 539 Don't Let Him Cast the Spells. I totally forgot you still had the summoning element. Nice, well done. Lu Xing and Li Jia immediately smiled. The summon gave them the upper hand. One of their opponents would have to deal with the Swift Star Wolf, allowing Mofan's team to cast any spell they wanted. The clash between the basic spells was simply trying to earn themselves a chance to cast their intermediate spells. As soon as the Swift Star Wolf was summoned, they immediately drew their star patterns. Rolling Wave. Li Jia was a fairly big guy. His aura when roaring was somewhat intimidating. As he raised his hands up, a surging river appeared behind him out of nowhere. The water came from both sides and merged into a surging tide in front of him. Water splashed across the place as the force of the wave surged forward. The rolling wave swept across the dueling ground like a water serpent, crashing down right onto where Shu Minking and his team were standing. Rock Barrier. The muscular student reacted fairly quickly. He immediately stood in front of the team and summoned a layer of stone like a small hill to block the wave. The wave struck the rock and sprayed 10 meters high into the sky. "Humph, is that all you got?" The muscular student standing behind the rock barrier held his hands up high. "Watch out for the wolf," screamed the student with red lips. The muscular man turned to his side and saw the Swift Star Wolf charging in his direction as the water rained down from the air. The fangs in his mouth suddenly enlarged by at least 10 times. The wolf bit down fiercely, shattering the rock barrier into pieces. The muscular student was left with a pale face. He panicked and summoned his armor equipment to protect himself. Using the armor equipment meant he had revealed his trump card. The Swift Star Wolf was rather smart. As soon as he saw his target summoning the armor equipment, he stopped pressuring him and withdrew temporarily. A few ice chains came forward, almost catching the Swift Star Wolf off guard. Luckily, the Swift Star Wolf had fled decisively, to avoid being flanked by other magicians. "That son of a bitch," cursed the maga with red lips. The Swift Star Wolf was too fast for the ice lock. She had finally completed her star pattern, yet the spell was only able to stop the creature from attacking for the moment. Most importantly, the muscular guy had already summoned his armor equipment. And, after their attention was attracted by the Swift Star Wolf, their opponents would have already completed a few star patterns. "Fuck me. Didn't I ask you to look out for Mofan?" screamed Shu Minking suddenly. Everyone was focused on the Swift Star Wolf. By the time they collected their thoughts, Mofan had already completed the terrifying lightning star pattern. Mofan's figure was covered in flickering purple lightning. He looked like a devil as the lightning danced wildly around him. His lips curled up. A magician who had mastered the power of lightning displayed an imperious aura. Once he completed the star pattern, the outcome of the battle against someone in the same level would be half decided. "Qinjun! Thunderbolt! Don't you dare!" yelled Shu Minking furiously. He curled his finger and fired the last shadow spike. "I got this. Brilliant light." I-Tutu intervened in the nick of time. A white glow blossomed above Mofan. The blinding rays shone down on him and completely illuminated Mofan's area, so brightly that it was impossible to see anything clearly. The strong light immediately revealed the shadow thorn flying at him. Its speed quickly decreased, and it was melted away by the light mere inches away from Mofan. Gugn, who was almost blinded by the light, almost jumped out from his seat. What the heck, that woman couldn't even control her brilliant light in the last match. After teaming up with Mofan, she was smart enough to use the brilliant light to create a light zone around Mo Fan, nullifying the last thorn of the Shadow Rose. The brilliant light came at the perfect time, as if she had long predicted its timing. Crap, this is bad. Equipment, use your equipment. The moment the shadow spike disappeared, the faces of Shu Mingkong's team turned pale white. The strongest intermediate spell was definitely not something they could simply ignore. Enjoy the wrath of lightning. Mo Fan stood still as he focused on controlling the storm cloud appearing above the dueling grounds. He pointed his finger at the sky, his eyes glittering, and a lightning strike landed in between Shu Mingkong's team. The blast immediately shattered the stage and knocked the pieces into the air. Again, Mo Fan uttered, calling down another purple-black lightning strike to land on the dueling ground, right on Shu Mingkong's head. Shu Mingkong was hoping to dodge it with his impressive agility, but as two other lightning strikes descended, he was left with no room to escape. He finally activated his armor equipment, yet even though it managed to resist the outstanding power of the lightning, he felt like his bones were almost collapsing from the space trembling effect. The space trembling effect of the lightning seed Qinjun was still not very obvious when it was applied to the first and second tier thunderbolt. However, the effect was a lot more terrifying when applied to the third tier thunderbolt, wild strikes. A single lightning strike was enough to make the space nearby tremble. As more lightning strikes descended, the effect would stack up continuously. Even if the target's armor managed to resist most of the damage from the lightning strikes, the remaining space trembling effect was troublesome to deal with, too. Shu Mingkong and his team were no longer able to stand properly after being struck by the lightning. The slightly plump woman was in a better position. Her defense was better than the others too, plus she was standing relatively far away from the rest of the team, hence she was not directly struck by the deadly lightning. Meanwhile, the rest of her team had basically used all their shields and armor equipment to protect themselves. Armor equipment was generally more costly, and not everyone could afford good armor, hence they were forced to use their shields, too. Rose Flame, Fiery Fist, 9 halls. However, the scary voice appeared once again. When Mo Fan started to attack, no matter how many people were there, or how many layers of defense they had no choice but to flee like rats. After the lightning came fierce flames jetting out from pillars of fire, which were definitely more than enough to leave a great impression on those caught within. Chapter 543 Slaps. Fiery Fist, 9 halls. When the 9 fire pillars burst out from the ground, Shu Mingkong and his team were completely roasted by the flames. They had already expended their shield equipment and armor equipment to protect themselves from the lightning strikes. The 9 halls broke down their remaining defense. The shocking destructive force destroyed almost the entire dueling ground. Even the safety barrier at the edge began to shake as the fire tongues continued to dance wildly between the pillars. The watching Gugn was stunned. He also had the lightning and fire elements, thus making him a full offensive magician. However, he was dumbfounded by the formidable power of the same spells of his 2 elements when Mo Fan was the caster. Soul Seeds. Gugn realized that the difference between their soul seeds had resulted in a tremendous difference in their strength. Mo Fan's Rose Flame was simple yet violent, multiplying the power of any fire spell by 2.5 times. Meanwhile, the Fiery Fist, 9 halls was simple and violent, too. Hence, it was the best spell to utilize the boost in power from the Rose Flame. Meanwhile, the strength of Mo Fan's Thunderbolt, Wild Strikes was somewhat similar to Gugn's, yet the space trembling effect had left its targets in a miserable state despite the protection of their defensive equipment. The slight difference between their soul seeds had resulted in an unexpected outcome. It felt like the battle had already ended after the lightning and fire. Their opponents had basically used all their defensive equipment, while Mo Fan's team was still holding on to theirs. It was impossible for Mo Fan's team to lose when their opponents could barely stand up after being blasted by the 2 destructive spells. As the situation cleared up, Gugn's expression turned unpleasant. Did we actually win? Li Jia and Lu Xing stared at Mo Fan in disbelief. Haha, we won! Mo-fan, you're so cool. I-Tutu jumped into the air and gave Mo-fan a kiss on his face. I-Tutu literally had a young face with enormous breasts. As she went forward to kiss Mo-fan on the cheek, her pair of giant rabbits was pressing Mo-fan's chest hard. The shocking bounce almost resulted in blood jetting out from his nose. I-Tutu was aware that she had overdone it. Even though she was blushing, she managed to gather herself and said sternly, "I was just overwhelmed with joy." "It doesn't mean anything, don't you think too much?" Mo-fan wore an evil grin without saying anything. The three referees soon declared the outcome. Xu Mingkong's team basically stood no chance after Mo-fan's 2 consecutive third-tier intermediate spells. The battle had become one-sided. As a matter of fact, Lu Xing, Li Jia, and I-Tutu were not weak. Once Mo-fan got the upper hand using his overwhelming power, Xu Mingkong and his team basically had no chance to fight back. Besides, I-Tutu's Death Strike magic equipment was insanely powerful, even comparable to Mo-fan's intermediate spell at full power. "Xu Mingkong, why the hell did you lose the battle?" Gu Jian had almost gone crazy, and yelled at Xu Mingkong. "Humph, you'd lose too if you were in it." Xu Mingkong was already in a bad mood after losing the match, yet Gu Jian still yelled at him. What could Xu Mingkong possibly do? He only had the wind and shadow elements. He could at most pin his opponents down and harass them. Meanwhile, the guy they were facing had lightning and fire elements, the 2 most violent elements one could possibly hope for, and was also able to summon a swift star wolf. How could they possibly stand a chance? This Mo-fan's strength was indeed outstanding, as expected of someone in the top 10 of the fire school. "A mere battle is nowhere enough to prove yourself, just you wait," said Xu Mingkong, pointing his finger at Mo-fan. In contrast to how Xu Mingkong looked when he first entered the dueling ground, his face was covered in ash and his clothes were ragged. His hair resembled that of a beggar, and he could no longer be described as handsome. The girls who screamed previously could not believe he was the same handsome, cool dude who had nonchalantly kept his hands in his pockets. Xu Mingkong did not want to embarrass himself any further. He turned and left the place. As he left, Gu Jian's mind went blank. Meanwhile, I-Tutu totally turned into an immature kid, hurrying to the seat she was sitting in before. She twisted her waist slightly and sat down in a perfectly upright posture. Now that they had won the match, it implied that she was not the sole reason they lost the previous match. Gu Jian might be good at one-on-one duels, but he insisted on doing everything his way in a team battle, a great contrast to Mo-fan, who knew how to utilize everyone's elements efficiently. In I-Tutu's opinion, Mo-fan was shockingly strong, yet besides the advantage of having the combination of fire and lightning, he knew how to communicate with his team. How to deal with their opponents, how to nullify their attacks, when to withdraw strategically, when to counterattack. In terms of fighting capacity, Mo-fan was a lot stronger than Gu Jian, who only knew how to scold people. I-Tutu let out a smile and glanced at Gu Jian, her eyes squinting. She would not show any mercy to Gu Jian. He would do what he was supposed to, and that was what he deserved for scolding her. "What are you waiting for? Crawl to her," said Mo-fan, whose dictionary never had the word mercy in it. Gu Jian almost broke his teeth from clenching them too hard. What the heck was happening? Isn't Xu Mingkong stronger than Bai Yulong? How could they possibly lose the match? With everyone watching Gu Jian, he did not dare to go back on his word. He knelt on the ground with a dark face. He crawled forward and immediately felt a great humiliation strike him like a rolling wave. He had a great urge to rise to his feet and duel Mo-fan to death. In the end, Gu Jian chose to continue crawling forward, his eyes full of hatred. The distance was not far, yet the crawl was more tortuous than crawling toward the Yellow Springs. When he finally made it to where that bitch was sitting, he saw her smiling at him proudly. I-Tutu had no reason to go soft on Gu Jian, and gave him a loud slap to the face. Gu Jian could feel his face burning. He never thought he would actually be slapped by the girl for scolding her before the day was even over. This slap is to stop you scum from barking at people again. I'm still a virgin. I-Tutu gave him another slap with the back of her hand, completely showing her evilness. The crowd subconsciously took a deep breath when they saw this. You should never infuriate a woman. The man's handsome face was already swelling after the 2 slaps. Since when had the arrogant Gugn ever suffered such humiliation in his entire life? As for this final slap, I-Tutu raised her hand, and was about to use all her might to slap the man to his death. However, as her hand reached the highest point, a tanned hand suddenly grabbed her wrist like a pair of pincers, not allowing her to fling it. Gugn had already closed his eyes, already thinking of a way to avenge himself in the future. However, his wretched heart was suddenly filled with a hint of joy.